Welcome to On Air with airfreight.com. I am your host, Kevin Carpenter. I am joined today by one of the top expediters here at airfreight.com. His name is Mark Peterson. Mark, thank you very much for joining me today. How you doing, buddy?
Dude, I'm pumped. Thanks for having me on, neighbor.
You're welcome. You are absolutely welcome. Thank you for coming. We thought that this podcast could use a little Southern flair, and here you are. Mark, go ahead.
I was going to say you're Southern now. You live in Alabama.
Yeah, that's true. We don't want that getting out, but yeah, that is true. Mark joined us in 2021 at the beginning of the year. He immediately excelled as one of the top guys here in terms of freight booked, customers handled. He really has demonstrated amazing work ethic and willingness to learn. I mean, he's probably our most accomplished pupil. I'm very proud of him. Mark came from, why don't you tell us what you came from prior to airfreight.com?
Yeah, I worked at it was just kind of your run-of-the-mill truck brokerage, mainly full truckloads. There's a dime a dozen. In where I live alone, there's probably 2 or 3 dozen different offices, different brokerages. I was able to kind of bring that over here. It's a little bit of a different attitude here, though, than it is at some of those places. When you're kind of in that community, you meet a lot of people, obviously, who do it, and stories get told and kind of share experiences, and they're all kind of similar. It's kind of funny, actually. When we were talking about doing this, I was thinking back to like when I was over at that place. And it like that, the whole attitude is kind of different at places like that than it is here. And so like, it's kind of a funny story on the guy who owned the one I worked at. He really wanted it to be like a Wolf of Wall Street office. And so like Friday mornings, he would like pick someone out and they'd have to like dress up and they'd come in, and for 15 minutes at the beginning of Friday, they'd do like a pump up thing. And, it was all based around money. It was all based on how much money you can make. And the pump ups would be like, let's go out there and get that money today. And there'd be like music in the background. But it was like the owner, like his philosophy was he called it the boiler room. He wanted it to be like Wolf of Wall Street, that scene where they're like, they got the person on speakerphone, and they're making a sale, and like they're all making faces, and like that's what he wanted it to be. And that's kind of like the attitude on that side of the market. It's just sell, 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 sell. And so it was like a pretty big switch coming from there to here,
Would you say the biggest difference, one of the biggest differences right off the bat is volume? Is that fair to say?
Volume, what do you like?
Volume of loads being booked, volume of loads being booked and, managed, basically.
Yeah. I mean, your entire job is to sell. The handling of the freight after you get a sell is secondary, So
right. looking at our service more like a commodity,
right.
versus what we do at airfreight.com, which is more of a service, I would say.
Yeah. That I'd say full truckload brokerages, like your average brokerage, is a cold call boiler room. Whereas here it's like, it's a service. We're providing a service, which was good for me. If I didn't come over here, I was probably 6 months from jumping out of the industry. You just kind of feel gross,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's when people hear the word freight broker in general, I think it carries sometimes negative connotations based on those types of places that you're talking about.
Definitely.
And I think, and I've never been in that environment, but you and I have talked at length, especially when you first started, about, again, like you said, it's all about making that sale. And the big difference is you're not selling anything that nobody else is selling. You're literally offering the same trucks, the same poor, low quality service that the other 10 freight brokers in the area are offering.
Mhm.
Um,
It's
so it's a
it's
race
act
to the bottom for price wise, is what I'm getting at.
and it's actually gonna be interesting, they passed this bill now, or the courts came down with this ruling, about, like, trying like, you have to a broker can be held liable, for negligence, and I was thinking about that. And man, like, we're in a good spot here because we are if there's one thing we're not, it's negligent. The vetting process is crazy here, and like we have like a pool of carriers that we work with,
Right.
and we've worked with for, you know, 10 years or something. But like I was thinking about all these guys I know who work at these other brokerages, and they've got to be terrified because there's no vetting. If you don't mind, can I kind of go into like what's interesting or what's different? I guess maybe like to like pull the curtain back a little bit is like so at these brokerages like that, it's like they all do the same thing. They all use the same load boards. They all post on these load boards, and they all have the same carriers calling. Like they're looking at these load boards and going, "Oh, so and so also has this load posted. They must be talking to this customer." They see all of that. And so they're fighting to get these, oh, I got to be $50 above this guy. And then that guy sees you and they're like, oh, I got to be, and so they drive the
You're
prices
fighting
up.
on two fronts, right? You're fighting on the customer front,
Yes.
trying to be the lowest price, and then on the carrier front, you're fighting to be the broker that the carrier is willing to give their truck to you.
Right.
So you're fighting two fronts.
And these carriers are playing that game too. They see, and so they're calling all of the brokers that have posted and trying to get a little bit more money,
Yep.
and so like
Yep.
the carriers and the brokers all see all this, the customer doesn't. And so, and another thing too is like they'll just go, it's like, oh, we just need this sale. We don't care if it's, a bad carrier or whatever. And if the carrier, on the flip side, there's so many brokers these carriers can get loads from. They can do a bad job. They can lie. They can be dishonest. They can not show up, and like it never affects them. There's so
Because
many
there's so
brokers
many
that
other brokers that will award a shipment to them
exactly, and the
with
same for
very little vetting, with very little
right,
due diligence.
and the same with brokers. There's so many carriers out there that they're using on these load boards. They can be dishonest to a carrier, and so what? They never have to use them again.
Yep.
Th- Yeah. So that's what's interesting. It is like that's the biggest difference I think from like having like a group of guys you've cultivated over years and work with. They know us and we know them. And so it's like that is the biggest difference because if you've got three people on the ladder, if you got the customer, the broker, and the carrier, and there's 1,000 carriers and 1,000 brokers, they can be dishonest and not do a good job, and it'll never affect them. There's just too many more people to choose from on either end of that. Whereas here, you're held accountable a little bit more because of the group of guys. We all know each other. Word would get around if we treated carriers bad, and word would get back to us if carriers were dishonest. So
Sure. Yeah. In fact, Todd Anderson and I did a podcast at length about the airfreight.com, our vetting process, but then our carrier selection on an individual load. We
mhm,
got, we drilled down quite a bit on those relationships that we have formed with these carriers over the years, which is like totally opposite of what's going on
yeah,
in what we call truckload brokerage.
right,
Yeah, so that's cool. And I think it's interesting how you joined us at airfreight.com because you were one of the brokers that we, talked to once or twice, and we trusted you with some loads there, and you did a phenomenal job, and something about you stood apart, and one thing led to another, and we brought you on. So let's talk about the biggest, the culture shock, that you probably kind of felt when you came over here. What would you say right off the bat, just doing the job? What are the biggest differences?
like we talked about earlier, the fact that once you make a sale, it's not done.
Yeah,
Like a bigger focus is on doing our service and doing it well more so than getting the sale. One
sure.
thing that as a company, air freight's done really well is like cultivated the sales pipeline. So it's like the service is more important than the sale, because we're not having to make 60 cold calls a day to go out and get these guys,
Mhm.
and so it's like, look, we've narrowed this pipeline down to where we'll get you the work. You just have to do it well, you
Yeah.
know? And so that changes, it kind of changes the whole dynamic of how we do our jobs, which is
Yeah. Yeah. And to give our listeners some insight, our leads come from people who are looking for our service.
right.
Our leads come from the major search engines, and we're well positioned to be the top options that the customer sees whenever they're in that time critical freight situation. They see our 5-star trust pilot rating. They see our well designed website and, well explained website that details our services. They call our number, or they can submit a quote online, but they call our number. They don't experience a phone tree where they have to hit one to do this or two to do that. The phone gets answered by a human right off the bat, which takes people off guard and immediately um, adds a comfort level to the customer. I'm sure you've noticed that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like when we were talking earlier today, and I was trying to get in touch with the customer to confirm something, and we called, and it was like an AI chatbot,
Yeah.
and we were talking about how frustrating that is because it's like they couldn't even transfer me through to the person I wanted to speak with. I
Right.
still
The
haven't received a
customer,
call back.
you called your customer had an AI chat bot
Yeah, yeah.
answer, and I listened to you talk to the chat bot. It was pretty funny. You weren't very nice to her.
Well, she wasn't very nice to me. I still hadn't got a call back. Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you this. In the truckload world, how much updating happens? How much do the care do the does the broker keep track of the carrier as they're picking up the shipment, moving it down the road, and delivering, and then in consequence, how often does the broker update the customer?
So that's totally different too than what we do. So that's kind of a hard question to answer because it's like the way we do it here. It's like if a customer to call, if you answer, you're gonna get the load covered with them, and then if they have any update needs or questions for you, they call you directly. You let them know when you give them all the updates. It's all you. At these full truckload brokerages places. Part of it's because I think they don't want brokers to steal their customers and leave, but also part of it, I think, is just a cost saving measure. But like they'll have like teams. And so it'll be, like say me and you are on a team, and then we'll have someone, you say there's a guy named Matt, he's our dispatcher. And so like we book the load and then we just give it to Matt and we forget about it. And
Mhm.
then Matt, will tell him maybe when it's been picked up, probably not. Really, his main job is to just like collect the PODs after delivery, but like he's not watching the loads. His main job is to just keep paperwork in line. So really, like nobody's updating. I mean, maybe a couple updates, but not many. That's totally secondary, you know?
How often did customers have shipments that were obviously time critical to them, obviously important to them, and they're using one of these, run of the mill truckload brokers?
I mean, so to be honest, it's kind of a different type, like just because of the nature of how it works. A lot of times it's not as time critical stuff. Also just because I think they know you can't really do it as in that position. And so like occasionally you have something that's like somewhat time critical. They need it picked up tomorrow and then delivered in a couple days. And like that would be considered probably somewhat time critical over there.
Okay.
Um,
Which is a
and
big contrast to us because many of our customers are calling for something they need picked up yesterday,
right.
which we
Yeah,
can't do obviously, but we can pick it up within a couple hours.
right. Yeah, and it actually is interesting, especially right now when rates are going crazy due to fuel prices. Like you have a lot of these brokers that they can't cover their loads for what they've committed to, and so we have calls from these customers who are like, oh, I had a broker fall off on this, and we need it covered. They you constantly kind of hear them go, whoa, you can pick up in 3 or 4 hours. You
Yeah.
know, like they don't expect it, I don't think, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they put the same premium on their word
Yeah,
and follow through. And I think it's almost like it's this well understood thing that, and I suppose there's customers are savvy about this and they know what they're going to get, but they also know that, they have a budget and this shipment isn't necessarily a priority and they just need to get this 40,000 pounds of freight moved as cheaply as possible.
right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, and there's some outliers to that, like, but not really. I mean, that's 98% of it. That's kind of what it is.
So
And
therefore, when the broker calls them back a day later, or even 2 hours before it's supposed to pick up, or maybe sometimes not even at all, right? And then the truck doesn't show up when they're supposed to be there. It's less. I mean, I guess the broker doesn't take that as seriously as an expediter, as someone that's been in the expedited freight world, and that's the only side of the freight world that I've been in. I cannot fathom dropping a load on a customer that has something set up with me.
I can't tell you that's you know, that's funny because like, I can't tell you how many times, like, I had people, they would like, when I worked there, there'd be people and they'd just go, "Oh, man, this load was supposed to pick up yesterday," and like, they never did it, and it's like, "Yesterday? You're 30 hours past pickup time. How did you're just now realizing this?" You know, like,
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy, like,
sure.
especially from here, like, that's insane. 30 hours late? That
It
happens
is
all
insane,
the time.
but it makes sense when you think about, the volume mindset, the commodity volume mindset that these people have. So,
Mm.
I mean, if you're a customer, if you're a freight customer and you're listening to this, know what you're getting into with a commodity or a volume freight broker, right?
Yeah, and I mean, but sometimes, look, to be fair, I guess sometimes that's what people want. Like, you know, you got, like, steel kind of, for instance, was like big
Raw
steel
steel. Yeah, sure.
where they're doing 30 truckloads a day. You
Yeah.
know, that's kind of what they want. They need, just because of the amount of trucks they're shipping out, like, every dollar counts, you know, when you have
Yeah.
30 loads a day. And so, like, in that
The
instance,
one truck not showing up isn't the
right.
same magnitude when there's 30 trucks that are already leaving that place. Okay,
Right.
that makes sense. Um, when you're talking about the individual guys in that truckload broker environment, I imagine it would get pretty cutthroat.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's constant stories about so and so stole my customer, or, you know, like, these brokerages, people leaving and you know, stealing customers and, you know, whatever else. It's not.
Because it is an eat what you kill it is an eat what you kill quote unquote model where you're making commission on the loads that you handle. So therefore this is your money and this is this guy's money and you guys are trying to make as much money as you can in that
Well,
in that setup.
and you have different managers, like, like, managing different teams who also get paid off of what their sales guys do. And so, like, these managers will somehow try to, like, you know, hide stuff so that their guy makes more money, so they make more money. I mean, that's like
Huh.
inside the company, which is interesting. So you've got, like, a lot of guys inside the company, managers and sales guys, who are, like, you know, trying to back in somebody and steal their customer, and then the manager will try to go to bat for their guy after they just stole someone's customer because that's good for them, you know?
Absolutely. That's a perfect segue into if we could just briefly talk about when you started with airfreight.com. What did you notice that was different about that? And I'll talk a little bit first.
Yeah.
We had Steve Jansen on earlier, on an earlier episode, and we talked about how far we've come as a company in not just our technology, but also figuring out where we fit in to this freight equation.
Mhm.
So we didn't, the things that we're talking about right now, where we openly are willing to tell people, hey, you're probably not our customer. You're probably looking for a volume truckload provider. You're probably looking for a partial
Mhm.
load. You're probably looking for something else that's not us. We are here for the most critical load, the one where if it fails, there's a problem. There's a major problem. And therefore, the premium that you're paying for our service is kind of well worth it. So we didn't just know that right off the bat. We figured that out. We put together our best practices. We put together a very good technology stack and processes and all that jazz before you came, before you started with airfreight.com. Uh,
Hmm.
so when you started, it was very much like, and this is why, you're special to me, because we just downloaded all of this stuff that we had, learned over the years and figured out, and we downloaded that to you, and you were the perfect guy to take the mantle on that, because you came from this boiler room mentality, this boiler room setup, where you were willing to just hit it hard, um, because these leads that you were getting were, way better than the leads that, you're going to get in that environment. So here's where I'm going with this. We didn't just throw you to the wolves either. We didn't just say, "Hey, do your thing." Yeah, I would say, we spent a lot of time, and what I'm getting at is the culture here is like night and day different from a truckload broker. Can you
Sure.
speak to that at all?
Yeah. I like you we talked about, it's kind of like you eat what you kill there kind of deal. So it was very much so everybody was out for themselves. And then, I came over here and it was like, it was like, oh, hop on the phone with someone for the first, I mean, what would you say? It was like 3 or 6 months. The entire day, I'm like, I'm also talking to a coworker here
Sure.
and like getting their feedback and, and people,
Billion questions, tons of questions,
yeah,
but
yeah,
we were happy to. You showed the hunger and the willingness to learn. You're very teachable, so we were happy to like be there for you. And I mean,
yeah.
it's paid off. It's paid off for everybody, I would say.
Yeah, it's much more of like a company mindset than like a solo mindset. It's like, so uh, you or Steve, y'all are all like still like you ask me, hey, we're considering doing this for the company. Let's see how it affects you, how it affects our customers, how it affects me, whatever, how it affects the company as a whole. What do you think about that? Which is cool, like, because like really I'm just kind of a sales guy here, and like I handle the shipments. Like I'm kind of just like the ground, like boots on the ground type of employee, you know what I mean? And so, like, it's cool that you guys, it's considered, it's like, hey, how do you think this would affect you? How do you think it would affect your customers? How do you think it would affect the company? And so, like, that's totally different than where I came from, you know?
Okay. Well, awesome. We appreciate you. We look forward to more uh more success, more success with you and as a company. So we are going to wrap this up with what I like to call the On Air Gauntlet. I'm going to hit
Mm,
you with 3 rapid fire questions. I don't
mm,
think too much about it. I want you to just whip off an answer as fast as you can. Are you ready for the On Air Gauntlet, John Mark?
I don't think so.
All right. Question 1. What is your dream
I can't hear you. Okay.
what is your dream vacation?
Ooh, New Zealand.
What's something you've learned from freight that applies to life?
Communication, like being able to ask questions and trying to think for think a solution through instead of just like, "Oh, I'm going to go my way,
What is your most controversial food opinion?
Ooh, mayonnaise is horrible.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
horrible.
Yeah, that's pretty controversial. John Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for being on air with airfreight.com.
Yeah, thank you, man. Enjoyed it.